around that same time is when I started doing some regional theater, which was such a world-changing experience for me because it was the first time being surrounded by that many professionals and realizing like, oh, this is a thing. I was at a show with my partner, and for some reason at the end of the performance, I turned to her and I was like, before the end of the year, I'm gonna be on someone's Broadway stage. 2 days before my birthday, I realized I had a missed call from my agents. Called back and they were like, hey, we've got everybody on the line. I want you to hear something. I was like, all right. There was a moment of silence and then it just goes, na, da, 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 da. Then someone, it's like, oh, also, Vincent, he's Simba in The Lion King. And I can literally feel the room go like,
hey guys, I've got a quick request. Could you subscribe, like, and comment if you like the content we're making? It's really important to support the channel and carry on having great guests like we've had. So subscribe, like, comment. Very important. Thank you. Thanks for accepting that. It's really appreciate it. Obviously, I've got a lot of questions to ask you about The Lion King, but I would like to ask you a lot of questions also about your background and everything.
Yeah.
Where you're from.
Yeah.
So can you introduce yourself the way you would like to be introduced, please?
My name is Vincent Jamal Hooper. I'm an actor and artist here in the United States. And pronouns are he, him, his. Yeah.
First question, is Jamal Hooper your real surname?
Yeah. So Jamal's my middle name, and Hooper is my real. Yeah, there's no stage name happening. Yeah,
because you the first time we spoke, obviously we can talk about it more, but you said you played basketball and football.
I did.
And I thought, is it a stage name that you found because of passion for basketball?
No, but I did play up the fact that my last name was Hooper. When I played basketball, I would definitely sort of, point to the jersey every time I made a basket.
It's pretty cool. But there's a lot of responsibility as well on the name.
Yeah.
So where are you from, and how did you get into musicals?
Yeah, so I'm from Round Rock, Texas. I usually say Austin, Texas, because that's where I spent a large amount of my childhood, because I was doing theater and stuff like that. But grew up in Round Rock, Texas, to parents who were military veterans turned pastors. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and like you mentioned, I had been playing sports for a little while, football and basketball, and then there was a game where I don't know if I can say I got injured, but it just had a situation happen where I was like, I found myself reevaluating my interest in the game. And so I quit playing sports, and I was filling out my, electives for my 8th grade year. And I was just like, I'll take this. I'd taken everything else. So I was like, I'll take whatever theater one is and whatever this musical theater thing is. Had no idea. And I got into it, and we did Annie, the musical, and I played Rooster Hannigan. And there was a night where at the end of rehearsal, the woman who choreographed the show, who then actually went on to be my high school theater teacher, she stopped rehearsal and was like, everybody, you need to look at Vincent and what he's doing, because he's in a whole other show than everyone else. And And I was like, no, don't do that. Because also, like, I had no idea what it even meant to be good at theater. I was just like, I'm just doing what y'all told me to do. You memorize your lines, you walk over here, you sing that, And so then fast forward a bit, and I'm in 10th grade now at this point, and I've transferred high schools.
Sorry, 10th grade, what age is it?
That's about 16.
Okay.
somewhere around there. Yeah, so I joined the theater program there, where she is now the primary theater teacher, and yeah, just that's when it sort of starts to really the ball starts to roll a bit. I played Ren in Footloose. Um, and it was like, all of the, and then, like junior year was Sky Masterson and Guys and Dolls. And around that same time is when I started doing some regional theater, which was such a world changing experience for me because it was the first time being surrounded by that many professionals and realizing, like, oh, this is a thing. Like, you know, I'm like, wait, so they flew you down from New York City to be the lead in this show. And it's like, and you're coming in, like, all the music already. And I was just like, oh, like, there's like a dedication and a craft and a real underpinning to this. Which then that changed the way I approached my shows in high school. So I was like, oh, I'm going to come in off book and I'm going to come in, ready to play. Yeah. And then, like in doing that production regionally, like my name starts to kind of get around town. They're like, oh, there's this new young kid and, he's got some
So
talent.
talented.
Yeah. Folks start to talk. And, I end up doing a production of a show called Passing Strange. It's an amazing show. It won the Tony Award for Best Book of a Musical. But yeah, I did that show. I ended up getting an award for my performance. And yeah, that was sort of like, that was my first time. It's like, oh, I'm playing the lead in a show. I'm getting paid to do that. It's material that feels like so aligned with me, that I feel so connected to. And so that was like me. And then like, then getting the award, like I was like, oh, I think I could really do this like properly. And so then, I auditioned I actually didn't even audition for several schools. I submitted to go to this school called AMDA here in the States, which is a performing arts college. And so I ended up getting into that school, but I was never really as enthusiastic about college as a lot of my peers were. I mean, like folks around me had quite literally Excel spreadsheets. And it was like, it's a whole, you're like, oh, like this is the name of the college. They need this kind of song. The monologue that's like a minute and a half. It's like, and that would be like 17 schools, and I was always like, and so I decided to not go. I took a gap year after graduating high school, and yeah, I just kept kind of like working around. I think I really was interested in proving to myself that, because I was like, I've already realized that I can work in this industry, but I think, that gap year, I was exploring the idea of like, do I enjoy it? Because, when you're in high school, I'm like, you're able to pretty much purely focus on just like the performance part of it. You're at your parents' house and you go to school. Like there's a bit of a safety net there. And so I was like, okay, let me try this in like a real scenario where it's like, yeah, if I don't book this audition, I don't have any money. Like and so and also like learning to sort of enjoy that, because that is really, I think, the vast majority of the lifestyle of an actor is like advocating for yourself, putting yourself out there, doing good work, sort of being, your own business, and auditioning. So I had that time and I was like, okay, yeah, I think that I enjoy this lifestyle in addition to being able to actually work in this field. And then I was like, let me try the college thing now, just to kind of check and see like what maybe I missed or, and I went, and I feel like it was pretty early on that I realized that it was like not really aligned with me. and things I had already experienced. And I mean, like, and none of this was anything I was communicating outwardly. But as it happened, at the end of that year that I was there, one of my professors um, took me aside and asked me, "Why are you here?" And I was like, I don't know," um, because in their class they had us keep a journal, and in my journal, because just prior to joining college, I had been up here and I did a showcase here in New York City, and so there was some degree of interest in me, like agents reaching out and the public theater, reached out about some, like, and it was just like there's people inquiring about me. And so my journal for that class was largely documenting a lot of the opportunities that I was like, that I missed, or, feelings I was having about, like, I don't know, like, do I stay here or do I leave? Or, yeah, just the inner turmoil of all that. Um, and so, but all that to say, like, through that conversation, I was like, okay, well, if this person is feeling that way, and if I'm feeling that way, then I think that's a sign from the universe that I need to go ahead and navigate my way out of this environment. And so I did, and went back on the grind and was, pounding the pavement, auditioning, working jobs, working as a performer.
I would like to stop first because there's something. Obviously, the first time we spoke, you talked about your passion for football and basketball. The other thing I want to know, and it's actually from an American author, a guy called David Epstein or Epstein, I don't know how you pronounce it, that talks about deliberate practice. You seem to have a very innate talent, but has there been any hard work or any repetition of everything? Because, I mean, obviously, I listen to you, you've got an incredible voice. And it's just, to me, I'm very jealous thinking this is natural and there's no practice behind it. But it's definitely, certainly the truth. But has there been any hard work behind this? And also, can you talk about football as well and basketball? We'll talk about it later. But yeah, hard work.
Yeah, I mean that. I think I had a conversation with my therapist a while back, and we sort of talked about how my internal system works, which is that, it's like, yeah, I didn't go to school and all of those things, at least didn't go to school for as long as most people usually do. And so, there was a degree of imposter syndrome in me that always was like, oh, you're behind. Everybody's, 10,000 miles ahead of you. And so that would then cause me to work twice as hard, which then would like put me in a position to be, in a show or whatever. But then, I'm surrounded by people who are, it's like, oh, I went to Juilliard, or oh, I went to that, whatever else. And so then like imposter syndrome kicks in. So it's like this internal system that it's like, oh, that was sort of the engine, was that I always felt like, I was like, yeah, by no means am I the most naturally talented person on planet Earth, even just in general, the most talented person on planet Earth. But I'm like, I think one thing I always stuck by was that I'm like, oh, I'm always going to give myself the space and grace to grow, though. And other people may, see me in this particular moment, in this sliver of time, and count me out because of whatever it is they're seeing right now. But for me, I'm like, oh no, I'm thinking like, a year from now, I'm thinking about, if we were to be running a race and, I started 17 paces behind you, by the time you turn around again to look where I am, I'm like shoulder to shoulder, like that's kind of the way that I approached it. Was I was like, because we don't know how much time we have, right? And so I'm like, I just have to get it done. And so, a lot of my time in those productions was spent really, keenly watching a lot of the folks who were veterans, um, and seeing, the choices they were making as actors, watching, their vocal mechanism and trying to figure out like, oh, that's how they're hitting that high note. That's how they're doing that thing. And then like translating those things onto myself, um, and experimenting with my own instrument and being like, okay, well, like what feels good for my voice? What feels natural? Um, yeah. So it was like, like my friends and I often talk about, the discipline that we were able to cultivate rather early on, which I think has helped us all be where we are now.
From would you say, when did you start to have that discipline?
I'd probably say around like 17, age of 17. It was like, cause my brain is also, one where when I wasn't in rehearsal, I was thinking about how to find that notch above. It's like, okay, yeah, like I know my lines, I know, my blocking and all of this stuff, but like how do I find that thing that, a mentor of mine said that you can be memorable or you can be unforgettable. And I'm like, that's sort of the metric for me. Is I'm like, yeah, like I'm always trying to reach the level of unforgettable, that it's like once you've seen me do a thing, that I want it to feel like, you just watch someone do something impossible. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of, like when people aren't looking, what are you doing to craft and mold that thing? The nuances, the minutia, the elements of it that, some people even watching it may not notice, but in an unconscious way, it'll probably feel. I'm like, oh yeah, that's where we're digging in.
I'd really like meeting up in 5-10 years for the podcast. Hopefully, if I'm still around, and you may be like a superstar or something like this. I like that. Come to the US, so you come to London. You're on tour in London, and we just catch up and we do another episode.
I'd love it. I'd love it.
Can we talk about football and basketball?
Yeah,
basketball I've played a little bit, but not like very seriously. There's more handball in France. That's much bigger. I don't know if you have.
Yeah,
you play handball.
Yeah. I'm kind of familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty big in France and in Europe. But obviously, football is one of my favorite sports. How I heard in the US that it's quite expensive to play football or to reach a high level, compared to Europe, where it's very affordable to play, and it's probably the most affordable sports in Europe. How is it in the US?
Well, I think I was lucky in that I I got out of sports before I think the time frame where the expenses really stack up, which is I think around like high school and on. So I was playing at a relatively young age, maybe around like, I don't know, 12, 11, somewhere around there. But it was, it was fascinating. I think that I enjoyed the kind of practicality of it. It's like, oh, like, we come in for, conditioning for, I think it was probably like, I don't know, a few weeks out of the summer or something. And then, it's like you sort of run your drills and learn all the plays and your position. And then you kind of just, it's a team sport, right? So I think that's something that I learned from that experience that I then translate over to what I do now, is this idea of like a unified front, right? That it's like, oh, we all are here with our positions that we have been assigned to play. And the only way that we find success in its highest form is when everybody decides to play their position at 100% every time.
What position do you play at football? What's your main
So,
position?
my main position was running back, but because of my speed, they often would sort of, oh, we're gonna make you,
The wings.
receiver or a safety or a linebacker. Like, just because I was so fast. So even in like a defensive position, while I was not like the biggest kid on earth, because of my speed, I could compensate for that.
How tall are you
Yes.
in
Now
centimeters?
in centimeters. Oh gosh.
Say in feet. I'll convert on
In
Google.
feet, I'm about 6'1", 6'2".
I still can't convert. I've been in the UK for 10 years. Okay, yeah, we're about the same size. I'm a little bit shorter than you.
Yeah.
No, I agree. There's always those fast players who are really really handy. Certain positions.
There's like, we need something to happen. Vincent, get out there and just do something. Run.
Cool. No, it's nice. You play basketball. I mean, everybody plays basketball in the US, don't they? I feel like.
Yeah, I was a bit of a showboat in those days, especially given my last name. Like, yeah, a lot of penalties were called on me for showing off.
And so, did you play more basketball or football, or like equally both?
I would say more football. I played basketball was first, and then my family moved to a different city, and then I think that's when I started playing football. But yeah, football was kind of my thing for a minute there. I think that if you had asked my dad and my grandpa at the time, they were like, "Oh, he's definitely gonna like go pro." And I was never, that into it. That's the I think funny thing about it is that I'm like, I was, especially for my age, like rather talented at football, but I wasn't passionate about it at all. I was just kind of like, I happen to be fast and I can memorize plays.
Do you feel you were more talented in basketball than football?
No, definitely football.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And did you practice music? Any instruments at all, or were you singing a lot when you were younger?
I took a piano class in high school. I was lucky enough that they offered that course at the high school I went to. I haven't retained a ton of that information, though I'm currently in the process of trying to teach myself piano again, because I've started producing some music and alongside a music producer, and so like that's really helpful for creation of the demos for the songs that I've written, just to get just some sort of foundation to communicate the idea of what it is that I hear in my own head. But yeah, I sang in the church choir for a little bit, mostly because my parents are pastors and that's kind of just what you do. But yeah, like it wasn't until, joining theater that I think got more curious about my voice. And I would, more often than not, I think because I realized very quickly that singing high was where I was most comfortable. So like oftentimes I was listening to female music artists and singing along with them because I was like, oh, that just feels cozier than trying to, be in this like bassy baritone land. And yeah, just kind of experimenting with different kinds of, sing rock and R&B and gospel and country, and just got playing around with things just to, because given that, there are 5 kids in my family, there was no real room in the budget. Yeah, I'm like, it's a pretty big group. And so there's not really room in that budget to facilitate, like, oh, we're going to put Vincent into singing classes and dancing classes and acting classes. It's like that's not realistic.
Because music is not subsidized in the US.
No,
is that right?
No, as far as I know, yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, I had to get very creative about how I learned how to do this stuff. So it was a lot of like, you hop on YouTube and you look up some of these, legendary Broadway performers, and you sort of key into what it is specifically about their performance quality that makes it, a thing that people revisit again and again after decades. You listen to different music artists and try and tune your ear into the musicality of what it is they're doing with their voice. Figuring out like, oh, this is how you sort of like land center of the pitch. You can record yourself singing and then listen back to it and then just tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak.
I'm definitely more an advocate of just trying out things. I've got 2 kids, and sometimes I don't want them to try things. I just want them to do what I want them to do.
Yeah.
But you just remember that even yourself, you need to try out, and it's okay to just not carry on, but at least try out, test things, and be curious, and then dive into what you love. Cool. So back to auditioning.
Yes.
After college.
Oh yeah. So after college, I kept going around and doing a production here, a production there. Like nothing particularly crazy until there was a production of this musical called In the Heights that came into Texas, and the guy attached to direct and choreograph, his name is Michael Balderrama, and he was at the time attached also to Hamilton. And I was like, well, I really want to be in that show. I feel like I'm suited for that material. And so I was like, here's my game plan. I'm going to audition for In the Heights. I'm going to book the role of Benny, is the character. And then I'm going to sort of, use that to showcase my work ethic and my talent, and try to open up a conversation about at least getting seen for Hamilton. And lo and behold, that's what ended up happening. I'm in the show. I'm in that role, and I didn't want to jump the gun, so I waited until we were in tech rehearsals, which is like right before we start performing. And I took Michael out to lunch, and I was like, here's what I'm interested in doing Hamilton. Like, what do you think? And he was like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay. He was like, yeah, I've already been talking to some people about you and yada, yada, yada. So then he got me, I got some audition materials for the show. And that started a year. It was like over the course of a year, I had 3 appointments.
Sorry, do you think he would have accepted, or you would have been on it if you hadn't asked? Would he have asked you eventually?
I don't know. I really don't know, which I think is, I guess, a testament to, I'm a big advocate for, you don't know if you're going to get this moment again, so you might as well be front-footed now. So I was like, because the worst thing he could have said in that moment is like, he could have dodged, but I'm like, if I didn't ask, I would have never known, potentially.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, you've asked anyway, so
yeah.
you're on it.
Yeah. So then, I ended up auditioning at 3 appointments over the course of that following year, and interestingly enough, they actually told me no after my last appointment, and it was disheartening. I think because I had at that point. I had auditioned every male role in the show except for George Washington. So it's a lot of material. And I was going in and doing all of this stuff memorized and, and they told me no. And I was like, okay, I told my manager at the time, I was like, I think at this point, if they were to come back to us and ask me to audition again, we have to tell them no because, yeah, I was just like, I'm unclear of what it is they would need to see more of, given the fact that I've done everything. Um, and it was also, a bit of a financial hit for me because I was not living in New York at the time. So every time they were asking me to audition, I was having to then find the money or borrow the money or, ask to use someone's airline miles or just figure out my way to get to New York
Where were
to
you
do it
based at the time?
in Texas.
Okay.
Texas, yeah. So that was tricky, and I was like, I don't think I can afford to just keep doing this with very little context. And so then I kept doing some work down in Texas. I was doing some like choreography and direction work, and at the end of that summer, I was like, I don't think there's anything left for me to do here. I've kind of done it all. Like it's like I've worked all the places you can work. I've been on both sides of the table, like you know. So I was like, I guess I'm just gonna go to New York and try and figure it out. And I had maybe like $800 to my name, and got myself to New York. My best friend Q, was already here. He was at the time in Hamilton as Hercules Mulligan. So I stayed on his couch, and yeah, it honestly felt like I was there for about 8 months, but it was in reality because I went back and checked the calendar. It was about 2 weeks, and but I had gotten like a catering job and an event staffing job, and just kind of like was trying to figure it out. And yeah, 2 weeks in, I get a phone call in the morning, and it's my manager, and he was like, "Hey, which production of Hamilton do you want to be in?" And I was like, "What? What do you mean? You said they said no. Like what?" And I don't know. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but yeah, they were like, you can either be a principal standby on, I forget which domestic tour it was, but on one of the tours, it's already in motion, or you can join the Puerto Rico production, which had Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator of Hamilton, as its lead character. And also, like my other best friend Trey was going to be in that company as well. So I was like, oh, yeah, I'm definitely doing that. Like, there's no world in which it's like I get to go to Puerto Rico, I get to work with Lynn, I get to be on contract with one of my best friends in the world.
How's
Like,
how's Lin? I mean, I obviously I knew his face from films and series, but I never knew what he did and what he was doing. And until his Dark Materials did that, it was on iPlayer and BBC. But did it get broadcasted or like? Did you?
I
Don't know if
think
you watched it.
it's here. I mean, yeah, I haven't watched it, but I've seen commercials for it, so I'm certain that it plays here.
Yeah. So I saw him and realized, I'm just going to look him up, and realize all the things he had done was just incredible.
He's a very busy guy. That Mr. Miranda. Yeah, he's very. It's funny because given all of the things that he has accomplished, he still comes off as very normal. I'll never forget when I first because he showed up on the first day of rehearsal for the Hamilton production that we were in, and the way that he the way that he said hello was like it was almost like he quite literally physically made himself smaller and was just kind of like he's like, oh hi, you know put himself below your eye level, and I was like, oh, I don't know if this is intentional or if this is just him or if he's trying to make everyone feel comfortable, or I don't know, but it was such an interesting, thing. And then even in the process of, rehearsing, like I was like, oh, you're just like, at least in this moment, it feels like you're allowing yourself or feeling like you can just be an actor, um, which feels cool, because then it feels like, oh, there's a equal footing here, and a bit of a camaraderie here, that it's like, oh, we're all working towards the same thing, as opposed to it being like, oh, our boss is right there, and we gotta kind of, be on our feet. It's like, oh no, you're just like another guy. And yeah, and then you continue feeling that way when you're like backstage playing Mario Kart with him, or we did like a Trey and Lynn did a freestyle rap thing. Trey would just grab random objects, and there's a video of it on the internet somewhere. But Trey would grab random objects and present them to Lynn, and Lynn would have to then incorporate that into the rap that he was currently doing. Yeah, it was just like, yeah.
Just a normal dude.
Yeah, it's regular.
I'd love to have him on the podcast if you hear me, Lynn, and you're interested in being on High Plains.
I'm sure he would. I mean, he's very busy, but I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe on Instagram or Twitter.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're part of this Puerto Rico production, and you started. When did that start?
That was rehearsal started in 2018, and we were in Puerto Rico before the new year. So, that phase of the production in Puerto Rico ran the month of January, and then we had a bit of a break, and Lynn obviously left because he was only ever going to do the Puerto Rico production, and then we went to San Francisco and we sat down there for a year and some change, maybe a year and a few months. Yeah. So it was a cool experience. Yeah, Puerto Rico was crazy, especially given Lynn's involvement.
And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
Just
after the same. Yeah.
So did you have to? How was it for you guys? Because obviously all the shows and theaters were closed.
Yeah, I mean, I personally found it, and I mean, I don't want to make light of what was a very traumatic experience, global experience, but I was pretty fine. I had left Hamilton in, I want to say early March of 2020. And, I was in LA with my partner at the time, and because she was going to do the LA production of Hamilton, which was about to start up. And right before their first preview performance, news breaks. It's like everything's shutting down. So COVID properly struck, and I was like, well, I was already in a headspace of going back to the grind. I was like, I'm not here with a job. I'm just here, and so I ended up writing a comedy pilot, and then I also did some TV. I did some work on TV. I don't know, things just sort of came, which was very lucky. And you also, you end up getting creative, and graphic design has been something that has been a part of my life for a while. Mostly it was just for fun, just because my brain is sort of tuned towards the visual. But then during the pandemic, I was like, oh, maybe I could just make this kind of a side hustle business. So I started doing graphic design for people. Yeah.
Just
it's kind of yeah. I don't have a ton of time anymore, at least not to take on multiple things at a time. If it's sort of a one-off of someone's like, hey, I need a logo, or I'm like, oh yeah, I can knock that out in a day.
So yeah, COVID wasn't as hard for you as for other people.
Yeah. It was kind of nice because I felt like I had been kind of like working for a long time, to have a bit of a break where it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about auditioning or, any of the pressures that come with being an actor. What you look like and, all this kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, I just get a second to breathe and kind of reevaluate and take stock of what is and what I want there to be and where we're headed.
So when did you leave Hamilton? When did you stop? And when did you join The Lion King
So
production?
I ended up on the tail end of COVID. I was asked to join the LA production, so I did that for. I think we were there for 8 or 9 months, and then I uh, ended up going to New York to do a workshop of a new musical. And after that, immediately after, I was then asked to go to Australia for 6 months to do Hamilton out there. So like Hamilton's been sort of we like to call them government jobs. It's sort of those long-standing things that you can pop in and out of, kind of at a moment's notice. But after Australia, I came back here to the States because I was, the workshop I had done prior to going to Australia was having an off-Broadway production here in New York, and they asked me to do it. And so, I was doing that show, and towards the end of the run, I was really about to hit this moment of like, I'm like, what's gonna be next? Because we're nearing the end of the run of this production, and I'm like, okay, I need another job. Do I go back to LA? Do I stay in New York? Like either way, I'm gonna need a place to live, and if I go to LA, I need a car. Like it was like a lot of these sort of logistical life questions. And then I think it was 3 days before we closed the show, I get the call that I'm going to be making my Broadway debut as Simba in The Lion King. And yeah, and it was such I mean, like I had auditioned for it maybe the 2 weeks prior to getting the call. Like that was my sort of audition process. And I never really thought much about it, to be quite honest. Like I sent the initial self-tape, and at that point in my life, I was like, like auditions are just a part of the thing, so thinking too deeply about them, I guess, just wasn't in the cards for me. Like I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna film this audition and send it off and go to work, and then just like, there's so much other stuff to do.
How
So
often do you need to do an audition, or how many auditions do you need to do? Do you just need to churn them out, like to get more?
well, I mean, like they come in all the time. So, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to do. But yeah, I mean, like, cause like my agents would probably tell you that it's like, there's quite a bit, quite a bit of things that I say no to, if I don't feel aligned with the, you know, character or the writing, or just like, I kind of like, judge what is there. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound like something that I want to, sign on for. And thusly I won't audition for it because I'm like, I don't want to waste anybody's time. So like auditions are a pretty regular occurrence. Like, there's not really a set number that you have to do, but that's the only way you're going to get a job is by auditioning, or else someone's going to directly offer you a thing, which is you have to put a bit of work in to get to that stage. But yeah, I had sent that initial video and was just kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever. And I mean, like I was at a show with my current partner, and for some reason, at the end of the performance, I turned to her and I was like, before the end of the year, I'm going to be on someone's Broadway stage. And I don't know why I felt that way. Like, and she was like, okay. A few days later, I get a call back for Lion King. That goes really well. And then, in that callback, we sing, we dance, we do some scenes, we try on Simba's mask. And then they took me aside and they were like, so you're going to come back in tomorrow for Julie Taymor, who's the original director of Lion King and the vice president of Disney Theatrical. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I came in the next day, that goes well. They were like, all right, are we done with Vincent? And Julie was like, for now. And
what do you mean?
Okay. Yeah, because in that final callback, they kind of put me through the ringer. Like I was like, I sang the song like 4 times in a row. And then it's like you do the dance twice and you're doing the, and it was just like I was in there for probably a good 20, 25 minutes, had to be. And so, yeah, then I had like one more, it was like a work session basically with the music team just to kind of like check in about some things, but they were very clear about it. They were like, this is very, casual. And I think I realized just prior to walking in for that particular, session, I looked around and I was like, there's nobody else here. And I was like, I'm not going to read too much into that because I'm like, maybe they scheduled it so that, there wasn't overlap and we wouldn't see whatever. But I was like, there's somebody else here and they're telling me this is very casual. And I'm like, okay. So I do it. It goes well. And then, then I was just like, went back to doing my off-Broadway show. And like I said, it was 3 days before we closed the show, 2 days before my birthday. And it was like, hey, my agents, I realized I had a missed call from my agents. And I was like, oh, I'll call them back. Called back and they were like, hey, we've got everybody on the line. I was like, okay. They want you to hear something. I was like, all right. And there was a moment of silence and then it just goes, nah, and I was like, wait. They're like, you're gonna be the next Simba in the Lion King on Broadway. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. So crazy. Like my first thought was like, are they really gonna let me do this? Because it felt like I somehow, snuck in there. It was very surreal. Because I've said this many times before, but you work towards something for, at the time, like just over a decade, and in the span of a short phone call, it's like, oh, and now it's yours, and here you go, and you're like, oh, okay.
What do I do now?
Cool. Yeah, like, all right, now we got to like sort of like figure out what the next thing is.
That's cool. How did you feel? Like, did you feel like it's mission accomplished, or you felt maybe a mix of everything? You feel like, do you really want me to be Simba?
I felt like, honestly, I think the way my spirit works is that I couldn't rest too long on the like magnitude of it or the it's like, oh, it's Broadway, it's you're leading that. Like I couldn't invest too much in that. That's just not who I am. So my brain immediately went to what I know, which is like the work, so it's like, okay, I want to do some research into traditional African masks and what they mean and the cultural background of them. I want to do some research into lions. I mean, like,
so is that something that you wanted to do or you got told to do?
It's not something that I was told to do. Like no one, in an actor's career, no one can make you do anything. So I was like, oh, great. Like, my feeling was always that when I debuted on Broadway, I didn't I wanted it to be in a very specific way, right? So I'm like, oh yeah, if I'm going to land here, I would like to land here in a capacity that is not easily overlooked, or and thank God. I mean, like that's what has happened is that it's like, oh, I'm a relatively young guy, and the first thing I'm doing on Broadway is playing Simba in the most commercially successful show of all time. I'm like, oh yeah, that feels right.
Did you have a lot of press articles written as soon as you got accepted, or did they come later? Did you do any shows?
They came later, so it was several months before the announcement came out. Several months. Yeah, and it was Playbill and Broadway.com and like a bunch of various other, mostly theatrical like publication outlets, which were sort of talking about it. And then like, obviously I posted on Instagram and, everybody kind of, and then early into my process of rehearsing, I met with the press team at Disney, and then that sort of spawned a couple of, oh, can you do this interview here and this little, online Q&A thing here. And yeah. So like that was a bit of
Can you do
bit of
this
that.
podcast?
Yeah, I'm like, so there, it's one of the interesting things about, I think, finding myself in this position is, I mean, Matt Damon talked about this at one point, but he was like, people, he's like, sometimes he's like, you reach a certain level of success and people will say like, oh, like, you've changed, man, you've changed. And he's like, there's no like micro change for me at all. It's just a sort of macro change of how the world around me shifts in relation to what it is that I'm now doing. So like that was a bit of a adjustment, and it's by no means am I suggesting that I'm like famous or anything like that. Like I'm not, but just I had noticed energetically when I would enter a room, whether that be in my personal life or professional life, I was like, oh, I am being allowed to take up more space because of my job. um, yeah, and I never lead any interaction with like my resume. Like I'm like I don't care about that kind of thing. But like I'd be at like a friend's party or something, and we're just all mingling and chit chatting, and then someone is like, oh, also Vincent, he's Simba in The Lion King, and I can literally feel the room go like, and just kind of shift just slightly, and everyone's like, we're gonna clear the space so that you can talk. You have the floor, like
This
hold
is the
court or
king.
whatever. Yeah, and I'm truly, and I've said this since I started rehearsals. I was like, I'm an actor with a job. That is it. I'm like, there is. I don't find much different between, because I mean, at least again, like for me, I'm like, I'm the exact same person I was before I got this job as I am after getting this job. I'm like, there's nothing different for me.
It's amazing, and I confirm, because man, you've just replied to me straight away when I contacted you, and very quickly we organized a chat. And during our chat, it was the quickest chat I've ever had for High Points. It's like, yeah, let's do it. Whatever,
Yeah.
let's just record. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, and you could have just completely ignored me first, or just it's amazing that you've got this personality and you don't change from that. I wonder, it's probably down to your education? That's always been remembering.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of like my parents. Humility was something that they always instilled in us, and just like tried to communicate the importance of that. And I would hope that I took that on fairly well. And in addition to that, I'm like, I've been in situations where I felt like, oh, you are too cool for me. Or, it's like, oh, you feel like because of whatever job it is you have currently or whatever your resume says that like there's some sort of like level that you're on that I'm not. And like, it's just like those sort of really uncomfortable um, scenarios where I'm like, I'm just really, I don't enjoy this. I'm like, I know what that feels like. And I'm like, oh, I would never want to put anyone in that situation ever. I'm like, we can be, because we quite frankly are, just people. Like, I'm like,
Really?
yeah, it's like, because also I'm like, I think it's important as actors that we don't put our worth into what we do. Like, I'm like, the fact that I'm Simba does not cause my value to increase as a human being at all. I'm like, I'm worth as much with this job as I was without, as I will be after. It's all the same. And the same is true for everybody else. I'm like, I don't care if you've not been on Broadway. I don't care if you've been in every movie and TV show and Broadway show on the planet. I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm like, you're a person, they're a person. That's it. That's truly it. We're just people.
Big respect to you for that, because we know everybody's not like this. Because it's also really easy to be dismissive. It's too easy to be when you get a bit of success or light on you and importance.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, I would imagine that it's because someone has probably done that to them, which then probably gave them like a chip on their shoulder or some sort of whatever. And whether unconsciously or not, there's an inclination to, return the favor. And so it's like, oh, like when I'm in that, space, I'm going to look at the people who doubted me or look at the whatevers and kind of turn my nose. And it's like, or not.
I've got a few interesting facts that I would like you to comment, but there's one that says there's apparently 5 to 6 African dialects spoken or sung in a show. Did you have to learn any of them or have any knowledge about them?
So interestingly enough, Simba, I think I only say one word, not in English. So yeah, I didn't have to learn anything in that regard.
And do you have to do any cardio training on this? I presume yes.
I mean, so the rehearsal process kind of was the cardio training.
Okay.
Yeah, because in actuality, I come on in the last like 30 seconds of Act 1. Then there's 15-minute intermission. Then there's about another 20 minutes or so in Act 2 before I come back on, and then from that point on, I'm just like going. And so in rehearsal, they would just cut out all that middle section. So I would go straight from my first entrance and then blast through the rest of my track. And like oftentimes we'd be running the show twice in a day, sometimes maybe 3 times, and then at a certain point it's like, oh, we're doing that with all the singing, all the blocking, all the choreography, like everything. And so it's like, it's kind of like doing a 45-minute hour CrossFit, because every time you enter the stage, you're, it's like, oh, you run and you jump and then you throw somebody and then you swing on a vine. And then it's like, there's always something happening. And you have, let me see, I think it's like, I have maybe like 3 opportunities to get water. So that's also part of it, is that you have to figure out, how do I sing this stuff when the last sip of water I had was 15 minutes ago.
How hard is it to sing in tune whilst exercising or out of breath?
I don't find it particularly hard. Um, but I think that's because of potentially the work I did before I started, and I guess maybe my own commitment to doing the thing well. Like, I'm like, oh, if I can't currently do it with excellence, I will figure it out. Um, yeah, just because I'm like, that's the gig. I think that it's when we do what we do well, it's supposed to look easy. So yeah, I'm like, and also I think that the only way we can do what we do to the best of our ability is from a place of ease. So, I'm like, yeah, like figure out how to find the ease and invest in the ease. And then, when people see you on stage and they're like, it just looks like so easy. It's like, well, because I've worked really hard and practiced a lot to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah, I've got a massive respect for people like you, or just all these artists you just don't realize they do a proper workout on during a concert, and also they sing maybe with some autotune. Did you see those documentaries about Lady Gaga and Beyonce? And
I haven't actually watched.
and
at least not
Madonna as
Beyonce's
well.
recent one.
Yeah. So the one that struck me the most was Lady Gaga. It's just incredible how much work she wants to do during the concerts, and she sings during the concerts, which is like, and then no wonder why she just completely breaks down after that, because it's just really physically exhausted, and she has to do that multiple times.
Yeah.
So yeah, how often do you have a performance?
We do on Broadway. We do the show 8 times a week. So Monday is our day off, and then we have 2 shows on Saturday and Sunday. So it's a pretty intense schedule.
That's really intense.
Yeah, but it's it really is a privilege. I've had many encounters with people who've seen the show that have sort of just reconfirmed for me the importance of what it is that we do, because I'm like, part of the reason why, to me, there's no world in which we can go halfway is because, on any particular night, this performance right here, right now, is someone's first show. And as I've, encountered, someone's likely last show. We've had a few people that came to the show with who have come to the show with a terminal illness, and we've gotten to speak to them and share a moment with them after the show, and it's just like, you're sort of caught up in how profound that is, that someone with such limited time has decided to spend roughly 2.5 hours here in a theater with you watching this show. And I'm like, yeah, given that they don't know and we don't know if they're going to get to see something else after this, if that is the legacy that I have the opportunity to leave with them, is one of, like, again, memorable or unforgettable, I want to be in this camp, because I owe it to them. I owe it to all the people that have poured into me leading up to this point, who are still pouring into me. That's a lot of investment from a lot of people for me to squander just because I'm tired. And obviously we're all human. Like there's going to be moments where we sort of dip, but I think it's the endeavor, always reaching for that thing, as opposed to deciding that, well, because I'm tired, I'm not going to even reach for it. I'm just going to kind of,
You've got an incredible mindset, mate. It's amazing.
Thanks.
It's great. How can you express yourself and your own personality in the role? Is there any room for that, or is it really set and, I want to say, rigid in a way?
I mean, it's a very specific show. Stylistically, and it's been running for 26 years. So like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think I've managed to find some colors in there that felt important to me to highlight, and also that just felt resonant to me. Like there's lots of talk about ancestry and legacy and faith, and those are things that are of great importance to me. I've recently learned more about my family tree, which was really humbling. And
can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, like I went down to Texas for a week in December just to visit family, really, and sort of have a pre-Christmas moment with them, because on a Broadway schedule, it's impossible to have that. And so I went to my grandpa's house, and he had all of these, books of just our family tree and history. And so it does something to you to learn that at least our oldest ancestor on record predates the founding of America. Like that's, you're just kind of like, oh, there's a real, and when you think about that, and then the number of people, I mean, and like, especially given that I'm a Black man in America as well. So the number of people that had to navigate and survive and, overcome so many things for me to exist at all is monumental, let alone for me to exist in a space where I can also pursue and achieve my dreams. I mean, come on, like, and so there's a lyric in the show where, it's like, oh, they live in you, they live in me, they're watching over everything we see. And that just lands in your spirit in a different way when you understand how far back that connectivity goes. And even, in seeing home videos that my parents had, many of which I hadn't seen, was also wild, to look at videos of yourself. And, me at the age of, I think in one video, it was my first Christmas. So I was maybe 8 months old. And then, you watch that, and you watch like yourself at the age of, I think it was my 4th or 5th birthday. And just like the things you can see in that human, and realizing that, oh, also like that child, they live in you. That child is one of those people that lives in you. And like that, to be able to talk to that kid and be like, hey, one day all of these things are going to happen. You're going to do all of these, you're going to touch all of these people, is really profound. And just, and just highlighting that.
Have you got any kids?
No.
Having kids adds another layer of this.
Oh, I can only imagine.
And you just understand yourself even better. I have a daughter and a boy, and she's she's nearly 5 in a few days. And she's got a very, I feel like she's got a very unique personality. It's not like me or my wife, but she's helped me understand why I was acting in a certain way, or why I had that personality, because there's a bit of me in her. But even more in my son is just incredible. Like, I feel like he's a mini me, and I can understand myself through him. Those two relationships are amazing, because you've got a very different relationship with each child. It's not the same relationship. But I can also be sometimes I feel sorry for him, or I feel sorry for myself being him, having been him a few years ago, and realizing, oh, that's why I wanted this. Oh, why I was acting a certain way. So maybe you learn, maybe by watching those videos, maybe that has put some light on this bit.
Yeah, like a living retrospective, crazy. It's really crazy. But also like so grounding to carry those things with you, and to know like the stock that you come from.
In The Lion King, is there anything, I mean, how old are you?
28.
Okay, I'm 35. It's obviously, I was nearly born, or I grew up with The Lion King, and I've been completely traumatized by it. I don't know about you. Traumatized in different ways. Like, it's been traumatized positively and traumatized negatively. But there's so many lessons that you get out of it. What do you get out of The Lion King? Is there any particular lessons?
I would say a big part of it, to me, is about self-acceptance. And in a number of ways. I mean, because, I think that Simba is very much not like his father, as much as he would love to be. But at the same time, there is that regal underpinning to him, that sense of responsibility and duty that resides in his person. And so I think that at the end of the show, largely it's about Simba reconciling both parts. Because it's like, yeah, I'm not my dad. I'm not. And that's okay. I don't need to be. I am still kingly and regal and, worthy, without being a carbon copy of what came before. And that the qualities that are intrinsic to me are also of use and serviceable in that way. Yes, there's like a reconciliation that I think I've also found in myself is, just the way people see me, for good or ill, and who I know myself to be, and just allowing all of those things to exist at the same time, without feeling a pressure to editorialize.
I've had loads of different ways of seeing The Lion King, and obviously there's loads of happiness in it, and realizing that Timon and Pumbaa are so important for just by singing you can cheer up a bit. But at the moment it's just crazy. There's so many stories you hear in the news, and you live that the road of Scar. It seems like it's a warning for people, that there will be people who will play a role, who will be very influential in your life, and will just but they will be found out at some point. But they won't be honest with anybody, and they will play a role of and they will have their game, hidden game for themselves, but they play they put on a different mask in public, but they eventually always get found out.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was doing some research about you and the Lion King as well, I thought, God, it's striking how Scar is. We're gonna find some scars.
Yeah, Scar
have to live with some scars.
The thing I find most interesting, actually, about Scar, as it pertains to Simba, is that in the text, in the script, there are a lot of lines that Scar and Simba say that mirror each other. And it's like, oh, like, Scar said something kind of similar to what Simba is saying in Act One. There's a connectivity there that I also think is interesting, because again, when you talk about sort of reconciling all the parts of yourself, so that you can be of service to your community and the world. I'm like, that's part of it. Is that not only does Mufasa and all the kings prior live in Simba, but also like a bit of Scar as well. I'm like, Scar was one of your influences as a child. You hung out with him on occasion. Obviously, we only see a couple of scenes in the show or the movie, but I'm like, it's not like he was never around. So there are some pieces that linger. I'm like, even I think the murderous intent with which Simba approaches Scar at the end of the show is a bit of that. Scar's like, he's like, oh, you wouldn't kill your uncle, would you? And Simba's like, no, like, I'm not like you. But I'm like, but he, in that moment, I think recognizes it, like, oh no, there is actually a piece of this man in me, or else I wouldn't even be here right now. And I think that also is a really interesting, I mean, if you apply it to humanity, I'm like, I would say that I would venture to say no one really has a stone to throw most of the time, because the reality is that any one of us could be as good or as bad as the next person. And with that understanding, there's, I think, a bit of perspective to be allotted, a bit of, in some cases, grace to be allotted.
Yeah. It's, again, having kids makes you realize there are bits of Scar and bits of Simba. Everybody's got some Simba, some Scar in themselves, and it's just education makes one of the characters stand out more than the other. Oh, how philosophical is it? Obviously, last questions, because it's been an hour and a half now. Don't want to take more of your time, but and it shows how approachable you are. Again,
thanks.
There's some interesting facts. Well, two of them I don't think you have any comments, but it's been running since 1997. I didn't realize that. I thought it was much more recent than this.
Oh, no.
And there's been 110 million people who have seen it.
Crazy.
I'm not part of these people. I will be at some point.
Yes, you will be.
Yeah, I'm in London or somewhere else. Maybe in New York. 232 puppets for the show. How is it in the backstage?
Oh, it's a well-oiled machine. I mean, they've been doing this show for 26 years, so they've got it down to a science. It's as much choreography as there is on stage. There's choreography in equal measure backstage. So, there's things are hung up in the rafters and they come down when they're needed. And then we've got a bunch of very lovely crew members who are making sure everyone has what they need, to do what they need to do on stage, including puppets and makeup and costumes and all of it. it's a real team sport.
37,000 hours it took to create the puppets and the masks, which is insane.
Wow.
Well, I mean, 232 puppets.
Yeah.
So no wonder.
Yeah.
How heavy is your mask?
Well, so I only have the mask. Thank God. And it's not crazy heavy. It's made of carbon fiber, so it looks wooden, but it's maybe at most like probably 2 pounds. It's not much yet.
Oh yeah, and there's for the North American touring production, there's 18 trucks that transports everything.
I
But I
believe it.
presume it always happens in the same theaters or same venues.
I mean, here on Broadway, yeah, we're in one spot. On tour, though, they move around a bunch.
I mean, 18 tracks is massive. It's just so much. I don't think.
Yeah.
They probably don't arrive at the same time. They arrive at different times because you can't have 18 trucks in a loading bay.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I haven't been on the tour ever, so I don't know a ton about it. But from my experience with Hamilton, my understanding is that there's a certain amount that goes ahead of the cast, so it's just kind of like always, that touch and go kind of thing. Of like the crew goes ahead and they set everything up and put the stage together and whatever, and then the actors arrive and then the show run begins and they do the performances, and then when it's like we're done in this city, it's like the crew packs everything up. Usually it happens as the show is going on, so if it's our final performance in Minneapolis, as the show progresses, the props and things we've already used that we no longer need, that's already getting packed up. So by the end of the show, a fair bit of things are like ready to be on the truck and, on to the next.
Interesting. What's your favorite part of the show or song?
I love, it's not even my song, Shadowland. I think is such a brilliantly constructed number. It's so satisfying, and it's just beautiful. There's real heart to it and struggle, and the music is gorgeous. Yeah, Shadowland.
And what are your plans for the future? Obviously, I don't want to put you in a wrong spot with the Lion King. But,
I mean, I'm like I mentioned before, I'm working on music. I've got a single I'll release in the next couple months. It's probably about 80% done right now. There's just some final tiny things to add.
cool. Are you already on Spotify? I can
no, not yet. No,
okay.
But I will be.
Okay,
stay tuned. I'm doing a workshop of a new musical starting next week. It's something I was a part of last year in May, that I'm returning to keep working on, which is really exciting. Outside of that, I'm like, who knows? Who knows? I'm open.
What's great about the job of an artist, and people probably don't know, and also being independent or freelance, is that you don't just have one job. You've got multiple projects and jobs going on everywhere.
Yeah, kind of have to.
And it's you have to. But also, it's quite exciting, and because it's things you do things you like, and you can choose a little bit more, or not, because you need to put food on the table as well sometimes, or pay your bills. But it's great. Well, thank you, man. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. 1 hour and 40 minutes. Not bad. So and all the best. And cheers.
Cheers.